Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Josh Matthews from Impact Wrestling, and I want to introduce all of you to the Wrestling Connection. Check out this podcast, guys. Don't miss it. It is absolutely very, very important that you check out the Wrestling Connection. This is a podcast that discusses the ways in which wrestling can connect all of us in an age of division. And in this time, in this era that we live in this 2020 that we're all experiencing together, I think connecting is very important. Connecting and talking about a sport, a form of entertainment that we all love, such as professional wrestling, is of the utmost importance for all of us here. So if you're a wrestling fan, I'm a wrestling fan. Be sure to check out the Wrestling Connection Wrestling Fan Podcast. It's Glenn and Chris from Scotland. Everybody knows that I love Scotland. I cannot wait to go back to Scotland. I've spent many nights in Scotland having an amazing time. And I just think that right now in the world that we live in and the time that we exist in, the Wrestling Connection is a great platform, a great opportunity, a great podcast to bring us all together. So check out the Wrestling Connection. Give Glenn and Chris a thumbs up, subscribe, do whatever you need to do to show your support, guys, to the Wrestling Connection. They talk about Impact Wrestling. Y'all know that I love Impact Wrestling. I support it, and I support the Wrestling Connection.
We are here again, ladies and gents, on the Wrestling Connection podcast. Welcome. Come on in, settle down, make yourself nice and comfy, get yourself a nice cup of tea or a cup of coffee or drink a wee bottle of water just to make sure that you're all hydrated in this tough time. We're going into the winter seasons, ladies and gents, and if this year hasn't been dangerous enough for your health and your well-being in terms of certain viruses going about, we're also entering flu season and cold season, so make sure you are drinking lots of hot and cold liquids and fluids to make yourself and your immune system nice and strong, and you can fight off the bad weather. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to episode number 26. I look up to the sky and now the world is mine. Welcome. My name is Chris, and I'm joined once again by my good close personal friend Glenn. Glenn, we've made it.
We're back, baby. No, that sounded so cheesy. We're back, baby. But we
You
are.
meant to do that. You meant to do that in like this big, massive animation, and you just went, "We're back, baby." Okay.
I know, because I caught myself halfway through. But here's the thing. First of all, a huge thanks to you, Chris, because we found ourselves in a situation, dear listener, where we knew we weren't going to get an episode out in time for last week. We weren't going to sit down and record. So Chris did his own and did all of it himself. Did last week's compilation best of episode. And I just want to thank Chris because I was moving house, and even though, like, to you, dear listener, there was only a week where you didn't get like a fresh, newly recorded episode, we banked a lot of episodes last month. And so for Chris and I, this is the first time in nearly a month that we've sat down together. Well, not together because I'm in my new loft and you're in your house, but it's the first time in a while that we sat down, and I missed this so much. And now that we've hit record and we've started going, I'm proper excited to be doing this. I'm chuffed to be back.
Yeah, me too. I'm very happy to be doing this again because part of our week, is usually recording a new episode, and sometimes throughout the week I'll find myself thinking about stuff and sort of mentally noting to myself, remember to say that when we're recording at the weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've not been able to do that the past 3.5 weeks or whatever it's been. So it's very exciting to finally be back here. It's funny because I usually have far too much to say for a usual weekly episode.
Yeah.
So how we're going to be able to pack in everything in this episode, I don't know. So let's do this one and we'll bank another one after this. You say you're sitting in the loft in your new gaff. So to get to your loft, is it a staircase situation,
Right.
or is it like a ladder, like a ladder match?
Nah, it's even better, Chris. So I want you, even though you've never seen the inside of my house because
No.
you're not allowed here.
Well, we were just talking
um,
about that. You're actually moved closer to me, so episodes in future when we can be in the same room are more likely now, which is exciting.
I like to think you will one day be up here in the Glen Cave and we'll be recording together. Because it's perfect because I can do this and make all the noise. Whereas when we were recording before in my old flat, like I could hear the neighbors sneezing. So they could definitely hear the Wrestling Connection being recorded. And it must have just been worse because all they got was my half of it.
Yeah.
But Kate is now 2 floors down. Watching telly, looking after the dog, and it's just lovely to have this space and this freedom. To answer your question about access, this for me is the best way a loft can be found. So in your mind's eye, you're in my house, right?
Right.
Bog standard stairs, there's a kitchen, a living room. You go up the stairs and there's 2 bedrooms, right? And a bathroom, okay? You go into my bedroom, easy. And
Whoa! That took such a dark turn all of a sudden.
I meant watch your step because there's a wee bump in the carpet.
Of course, right?
Uh-huh.
Good.
So you're in my bedroom and you think, oh, Glenn's got a lovely bedroom. There's a bed. There's some drawers. There's the slidey mirror doors for where the clothes are hanging. There's a cupboard for storage. Maybe I'll just look in this cupboard. Oh my God! There's a staircase in this cupboard. It's a secret room. And I'm begging my wife, can we please just get one of those magical bookcases from the movies where you get the right
Yes.
book and then it swivels open. And then you go up and you're here. Now, you and I, Chris, are tall men. In fact, you're the tallest
Yes.
man I know.
Right.
So I'll warn you this is very much a sitting down room and not a standing up room.
That's fine by me. I don't mind. I like a sit down.
So yeah, but it's great. I've got my PlayStation up here, like a lot of my wrestling stuff, my work stuff. So I do my marking up here. I do all my lesson planning, all that. But I have all my fun stuff here too. Like, and it's also a gym because I've got my bike up here, and there's the yoga
Lovely.
mat and all that. So, man, I'm in such a good place right now, physically and emotionally.
Christ, Kate will never see you. You'll always be up there. Like
Who?
you'll be up there playing the PlayStation, watching wrestling, working out, marking and recording at all times. So apologies, but I have.
Yeah.
You are now part of the show. You're now married to the show.
I know. Listen, I'm doing all those things right now. I'm not just recording. I'm currently on the exercise bike and giving wee John McGlinchey 4 out of 10 on his essay.
It's John McGlynn. I'm gonna guess that that's not a real student.
No, there probably are plenty of John McGlincheys going about, but I just made the name up.
When I think about that, did you ever watch Chewing the Fat?
Oh, yeah. Was it Rab McGlinchey?
Rob McGlinchey
I like Toots.
interpreting for the Neds. Rob McGlinchey. Yes.
Oh, man. Chewing the Fat was brilliant, wasn't it?
So good. It didn't quite reach the legendary status of Still Game, but it's really underrated in terms of the segments and the skits and that sort of thing. Ronald Villiers.
Ronald Villiers, I'm the Widdicombe and Pump. I can date Chewbacca. Ooh, burn the witch, and she's no got green skin and a black hat and a cat, because this isn't the Wizard of Oz, this is Salem.
This is Salem and it's no the Wizard of Oz. I love the one they're sitting in the parlour in the Wild West and they're playing cards and he's like, what you got, Jake? Big Jake. And he goes, read them and weep, gentlemen. Gin rummy. Right. One more.
No, one more. I love the Quick Fit advert
That's
that
the
they're
best
doing.
one. That's the best one.
Oh, Mo. No, I'll never remember that. That's too hard. What if I shorten my own name? Tero.
I'll tell you what.
Finty
I'll tell you what. I'll be Dick, right? Mo and Rick and David. I'm the ding ding dido. Right.
I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be as far away from the microphone as possible.
Wrestling. Oh god, I'd love to see Ron Villiers.
Hey, listen, we saw him at ICW.
We did see my ICW, yes. Not I'd love to meet, because it's so funny, right? When I was watching Tune the Fat at the time, it's just this funny character. But now, because I've been in those situations and I've been in auditions, it kills me sometimes when you have like a funny audition sort of scenario, and I'm thinking Ronald Villiers in my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
God.
I can totally get that.
I just wish I could do it. Right, well, episode 26, what I missed last week was our chatting about the WrestleMania that links up with the number. So, what are your memories of WrestleMania 26 from Arizona?
I've always thought it was cool that they chose Arizona, because it doesn't seem like a typical WrestleMania venue. I don't know.
Bit random, innit? Yeah, bit random.
it
Stadium's
just-
huge, though.
It's a huge, big college stadium. I'm pretty sure that is. Controversially, I still sometimes think that I prefer 26's Sean and Taker to 25's.
Right.
I'm not saying that to be contrarian because the 25 is just outstanding, but I think the 26 match has probably the best tombstone in the history of tombstones, doesn't it?
Right, yeah. Absolutely. I remember when he hit that, I was like, my mind was blown. Now everybody hits fun tombstones, but like
Yeah.
Taker had never jumped before,
Yeah, I look at 26 because it was mental that it was 2010 and Brett and Sean were both in main event matches of a
Crazy.
WrestleMania. The Brett match is so disappointing. I feel like if Brett had those limitations, they should have done what Vince and Hogan did at WrestleMania
Okay.
19. God, pardon me, because there weren't many bumps in that Vince and Hogan match, with the exception of like the big ladder thing. It was just violent and brutal, and it's probably my favorite match on WrestleMania 19, which is really saying something.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, so I fondly remember it for the hype for Brett and Vince, because I was so excited, and Brett brought his gear that year and he never wore it for whatever reason, but I wanted to see him in his tights again.
Yeah. That would have been amazing.
I don't remember much else from it. Is Cena and Batista that wrestled at that show?
Cena Batista, yeah, that was
That's
a really
a
good
good
match,
match,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually quite underrated. And Edge and Jericho have the match for the world title, which could have been so great, and there's something off about it. I don't know what it is. It's just something I don't know if it's like a dead crowd or just weird
Yeah.
timing and that sort of thing. There's just something off about it.
It just
It's
felt
a
a wee
strange
bit
WrestleMania.
washed out, but like Edge and Jericho had better matches on TV and SmackDown in 2002.
Absolutely.
Those guys they have great chemistry. There's no denying that, and they were a good tag team as well. But yeah,
Well-
I feel like it's not one that it's not WrestleMania. It's not my go-to, but I'll always go back to highlights from it.
Yeah. It's very, very far up on my list in terms of like ones that I'd go back and watch. I mean, when I say far up, I mean like not near the top of the favourite list. I mean far away from the favourite list,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. There's just a bit of a weird pacing to the show. And I think the key to a great pay-per-view is the opening match, right? And
Yeah.
I think I'll argue that point with any WrestleMania, with any SummerSlam, with anything like that, right? Because it sets the tone for the entire night. And that's why I almost don't agree with the idea of dark matches. You know what I mean? Like, it should be the first thing that the crowd see, should be the opening match of the show, and the crowd are just buzzed to see wrestling, and then it will set the pace for the rest of the show. The one on this show, WrestleMania 26, the first match is The Big Show and The Miz versus R-Truth and John Morrison for the tag titles. And I
Nice.
just thought it was a random opener, and it's on for 3 minutes. Big Show wins with the big punch, knockout punch, and then that's like the end of that. And then they go into the Money in the Bank, and I was like, surely they should have went that like the other way about. Surely the Money in the Bank, this 15-minute ladder spectacle with I think there was about 10 people in it this year. That would have made the crowd go bananas. And of course, it's WrestleMania. They're already excited because it's WrestleMania, and sure, they're excited for Miz and Big Show versus Truth and Morrison. But imagine that, the buzz starting off with that Money in the Bank ladder match and stuff, and then going on to Punk and Mysterio on that show, and then there's Orton versus Cody Rhodes versus Ted DiBiase, the explosion of legacy, which kind of falls after the Money in the Bank, so it's a wee bit kind of flat as well, which is not where Orton should have been on that show. It's just a bit of a random WrestleMania, and then of course the last match being Taker and Shawn, learning from the year before and realizing no one's going to be able to follow it, plus the careers on the line. It's the perfect main event, and it would have made the show completely bonkers if that match wasn't on last. That would have thrown off the whole thing. So I think it is a very interesting WrestleMania, and again, I agree with you, not one that I go back to very often. What are some of your favourite, just off the top of your head here, we should do a whole episode about this, but what are some of your favourite opening matches you can think of right away from pay-per-views that really set the tone for the show and really get going in like an exciting pace?
I love the opener to Invasion, Edge and Christian versus, is it Lance Storm and someone else?
Christian? No, obviously not. Lance Storm and Mike Awesome?
Yeah, that's right. So Edge and Christian versus Lance Storm and Mike Austin, because Edge and Christian were wrestling as babyfaces for the first time in a very long time.
Yep.
And the crowd they were so over. The crowd were so hot for them, and it was an exciting, fast-paced match. I always, and here's another subtopic of that, like who is like the king of the opener,
Yep.
And I felt Christian's one of them, I would say Kofi is another, Ziggler probably. But to answer your question, that's the one that screamed out to me. I'm thinking of like some of my favorite WrestleManias. Not all of them have the best openers. WrestleMania 17, is opened with Jericho and Regal. A good match. Is that? Yeah, that's right. That's what it opens
Yeah,
with.
I love that match, and I think it's perfectly placed there because the rest of the show just builds and builds and builds and builds. You
Yeah.
know, the only other match they could have opened with really would have been the APA versus the Right to Censor. You know what I mean? I'm thinking surely you want to put one of your top heels on first, and then one of your most over baby faces on first. I agree with that one, but I guess a lot of people don't like it because it's just a quick kind of IC title match for Jericho.
Another one that comes to mind is Bret and Owen at WrestleMania 10.
Absolutely.
And you know what? Because it was quite a surprise that it happened, and we'll maybe talk more about this next week at episode 27, but Edge and Del Rio at WrestleMania 27. Like a terrible WrestleMania. I think that's one of the only decent matches on it.
Agreed. That is probably the best match in the show, other than Punk and Orton, maybe. But yeah, not the greatest one. But other ones I can think of, I immediately think of Rey Mysterio and Kurt Angle from SummerSlam 02.
Of course, yeah.
I think that's a perfect opener. I think Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania 21 is a perfect opener. And there's loads of good ones.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's loads of good openers. And even like big, ladder matches and multi-man matches and stuff, I think is a good way to open a show. And there's loads I'm forgetting. There's obviously been great openers, like Big Show and Cena from WrestleMania 20. So much fun.
Yeah.
It's not even 10 minutes, but it's so much fun. The reason I brought it up is because I was thinking about the most recent, from recording day, the most recent AEW pay-per-view, which was All Out 2020. And I was so excited for the show, and I was so buzzed for the show, and I remember that one of the matches I was looking forward to most was Britt Baker versus Big Swole. And it was this match that was going to be a cinematic style match. And it was pre-taped, and it was in the dentist sort of operating room and all that stuff. And that's never happened before.
Yeah.
A match in a dentist office. What the hell, And just the idea of that made me so excited and so not excited, but so intrigued by it, and made me look forward to it a lot. And it was announced that it was going to be on the pre-show, and I was like, what? Why would you put that's such a nice break from the in-ring action, It would easily break up the show, and it'll make it a memorable moment of the pay-per-view. Don't put it on the pre-show. And then they said, okay, we listen to our fans. We're not going to put it on the pre-show. We'll put it on the main show. And I thought, perfect. There you go. It's going to stand out on this great show that was really, really wrestling heavy. And then they just put it as the opener, and it just didn't work at all. And it just put the whole, in my opinion, it made the whole show feel really flat. It didn't even get off and running, I think. Because in the first match, that I guess if that wasn't counted as the opening match, the first match would have been the Young Bucks versus Jurassic Express, which was a great fast-paced tag match. I could have easily opened the show and would have set the tone for a great night of wrestling. Not to mention the Matt Hardy thing, not to mention the really long tag match, the heat and the humidity. It just was a bit of an off day for AEW, and it just was a bit of a terrible. They were kind of doomed from the start. I think there was a terrible decision to put that one on first. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I do as well, and it's a shame because Swole and Baker are probably they're amongst my favorite wrestlers in that entire roster of any division, and I'm starting to worry. I'm hoping that this isn't the case because they've not had their in-ring match yet, as far as I'm aware. But I'm worrying that they don't have the best chemistry. Like they're good, going at each other verbally, but that's the first time we've really seen them get physical for a long period of time. Obviously, Britt Baker's had this kind of injury story going on, and so this had a lot of hype for me. This was one of the ones that I really was looking forward to, and I thought it would be brilliant. And it kind of bored me. It just wasn't their best presented cinematic matches, and we know that AEW can do a decent cinematic style match.
Yep.
Excuse me. So I'm hoping that when they eventually get to square off in the ring, that we'll get the kind of payoff that angle deserves. But I'm worried that because this happens quite a lot. You get two wrestlers who are very good, but they just don't have the greatest chemistry together. And Kevin Owens and AJ Styles comes to mind. Like two great wrestlers, they don't seem to really mingle that well.
Absolutely.
So we'll see.
So before we move on and we go any further with this episode, we just want to give a special shout out to our introductory legend this week. I say legend. Do you know what? I'm going to say this. He was around when I was a wee boy. He was around doing all sorts of things through my, when my maturation period as a wrestling fan, whether it be a commentator or a backstage interviewer or a host of some sort. And now he's still a commentator in Impact Wrestling. And you heard him at the start of the show, Mr. Josh Matthews. A very, very welcome addition to our Cameo Wrestling Connection family.
Yeah.
And we've managed to get a few good ones in. But in terms of the professionalism of this one, and just the way that he came off in this intro, as you all heard at the start of the show, as like a total host and as a total promo kind of guy, you can tell he's been a broadcaster for a long time. Just the nature of the way he did the clip, you know what I mean? What did you think? How great was it to hear Josh Matthews introduce our show?
It just like filled me with joy. Like, and that's not a hyperbole. It's like, you know what 2020 is like, man. Like, life has been tough for us all, and that was a nice little spark of joy in what's been a stressful year, I suppose.
Yeah.
And as I was saying to you before we hit record, you know, I used Cameo to get in touch with Josh. And I've used it before when we've had other guys and gals. Actually, we've not had any female.
No, we
guests
should
on
we
the
should
podcast.
maybe work on that.
We should do. I mean,
We
it
should
needs
work
to be
on
a bit
that,
more
yeah.
representative. And he got back. I must have just been good timing because he got back super quickly. And you know, he spoke in that intro about what we like to do here, and we'd like to talk about how wrestling can connect us all, especially because you know it feels like the deeper we go into this absolute mud show that is 2020, the more divided
Yep.
the world becomes. And to give you kind of a beautiful example of this, that same day when I got the video through from Josh. Look at me saying Josh if he's my pal.
Hey Josh, thanks for coming on the show.
Robert came round, and Robert's peak like wrestling fandom. So listeners, if you don't know, Robert's my oldest friend, and he lives near me now. So he came round and we sat in the garden together. And Robert's peak fandom was Attitude Era, so he's just a wee bit before Josh Matthews.
Right.
He would have seen him in Tough Enough initially, but
That's what I thought of.
Yeah,
I was like, Tough Enough 1 style Josh Matthews.
I know, right? And here he wasn't bad at all in the ring. Like,
He wasn't bad at all. Not at all.
So, like, I was saying to Robert, was asking how the podcast was going. I was talking to him about how we're trying to get more people to do introductions for us, and I mentioned Josh, and Robert, being the Attitude Era kind of guy, not really fully into his ruthless aggression, wasn't quite sure who Josh was, and Robert doesn't really follow Impact that much. He'll maybe just catch the highlights on YouTube. And so I thought, rather than tell you, I'm going to just show you something that will spark a memory. Now, which famous Josh Matthew clip do you think I showed him to kind of spark Robert's memory? It's not from the Attitude Era, obviously, but it maybe involves an Attitude Era star.
Immediately I thought of Mr. White, That's Not Wise.
Nah, see, I think that's too niche for him because
You're right, okay.
Lunchtime Suicides was a .com series, wasn't it? And that here's
Lunchtime Suicide.
I know. Here's the thing: we spoke about this recently, and like, I'm not like, I kind of wince when I think of Lunchtime Suicides, but you know, as good and deadpan as Tim White is, and as much as we maybe don't want to glorify that series, the MVP is Josh Matthews of that series, isn't it? Like, he's he plays the straight man so well, and he's so funny, and his comedic timing is great. But now, what other Josh Matthews famous moment from his WWE years do you think I used to connect with Robert?
I can't really remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
Anything major? Did he get involved in the ring at some point? With someone? Was it The Rock? Maybe
He did have a couple of TV matches, I think. But no, I'm talking about the time he was famously possessed by the Undertaker.
Oh yes, of course, that's right.
And I showed that to Robert, knowing that, because obviously Robert knows Taker and Randy Orton, knowing that Robert would find it really cool. And so Robert and I had this kind of nice moment where we kind of giggled, and I showed it to Robert, and he just thought, like, this is just classic wrestling. It's like, it's campy, it's silly, but it's also really cool. I've always had so much time for Josh as a commentator, and you know how we spoke a few weeks ago about how I've been really digging the aesthetic of COVID era Impact with zero crowd. I actually think, you know, like, in terms of announcers in COVID, Josh Matthews has to be like one of the absolute best, because if you think about it, if you have no performance center stars making noise or extra wrestlers making noise that you have in AEW, and if you don't even have any simulated noise like you have with the Thunderdome, you really, I mean, I'm speaking as somebody who's never been a broadcaster, right? But I can only imagine you really, really have to bring as much energy to calling the action as you possibly can, arguably maybe even more so, because you're not feeding off the crowd as a commentator. And so I think he does a great job in Impact, and he's one of the highlights of the show for me.
Absolutely, and I think he doesn't get enough credit in general, because although Impact before COVID, when they're having a lot, actually, a lot of momentum really behind their shows, especially their pay-per-views, I think Josh did a really good job because when you think of wrestling, right? Do they
Yeah.
maybe 10 years ago in 2010, like name your top 3 or 4 companies? TNA would probably be number 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now it's like you're lucky if someone mentions Impact because of everything else that's going on that's so big. You know, everyone else has got TV deals here, there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that for a long time now that's been the case. And Impact have done a really good job of like sort of rebuilding themselves and
Yeah.
getting this reputation. It's just a great wrestling company with a lot of buzz. And I think Josh Matthews has probably been commentating a lot of those shows with a bit of a chip on his shoulder because he's not Michael Cole and he's not Jim Ross and he's not Excalibur and he's not Kevin Kelly. He's not these amazing play-by-play guys that you hear every week on national TV that everybody talks about, all the news sites covering all that stuff. We hardly talk about Impact on this show, you know? But when we do, we go, oh, and by the way, there's this talent or there's this wrestler, this wrestler. We never mention Josh Matthews, and we probably should.
We should,
you know, because he is
yeah.
the anchor of that show, you know?
Yeah, and like I say, just to reiterate, like I think he by default he deserves credit because he's a great announcer, he's a great commentator, but I think he just deserves that extra credit because he's bringing a lot of energy to that broadcast, as are the
Totally.
wrestlers, obviously, but he's doing it under even more difficult circumstances. So thank you so much, Josh Matthews, because you made
Yes.
our day, and it's an honor to have your voice on our podcast. It's an honor to have you mention the name of our podcast and mention our names, and it's an honor to hear you speak so enthusiastically about what we're trying to do with this. So thank you so much, Josh.
What other than moving house, have you had a chance at all to watch any wrestling?
Only kind of recently because we were without internet for so long, and for the first time in a long time I used up all my data, not from watching wrestling but just by kind of using my phone. I use my phone so much for work, like because we use Google Classroom and all these tools. I do all my marking with a stylus now and on my phone.
Oh,
Kids
wow.
take pictures of their work, but it doesn't up the
Fancy.
data. It is. It's a much safer way of doing it in this pandemic times. And to see when this virus is finally eradicated, I don't think I'm ever going to go back to taking 30 jotters home. It's just
Really?
get the kids to take a picture of your work, send it to me, and I'll mark it. And with a stylus pen, it's amazing. But to answer your question about wrestling, so about 2 or 3 nights ago, Kate went away to do something and had a bit of time just to myself, and we'd finally got connected online, and I put on Clash of Champions 2020, which I've still not fully finished, and I've only seen the ladder match that opens it up, and it was incredible. And that's really all I can talk about because I'm quite behind on Dynamite now. I'm behind on WWE. I've barely even seen like the YouTube highlights of things, but that first match of Clash of Champions, there's 2 things I want to say. First of all, the match was expertly paced. It was well done. They owned it despite there being no crowd there. And unsung hero of the match was the commentators, because even though like those 3 guys did a really good job, but if you're in that restrictive setting where there's not a real audience there, I feel like Cole and Graves need to turn it up by 10 to really sell what's going on. And it's also just so genius. And Sami Zayn's just this great guy you just love to hate. He's got a face you'd never tire slapping. And I just thought he played his role perfectly. And it was just the best result because now we get to have more of egotistical, really irritating Sami Zayn on television. And I think that's just money. It did, though, make me realize that I really don't like the Thunderdome. I've realized that.
You don't like the Thunderdome?
I've realised this. Now, go back a few episodes, folks. When it was launched, I was singing its praises, and it is a refreshing change, but I actually think I prefer the Performance Centre. And I think it's more just because it gives me a headache, and I'll tell you why. Like, it literally gives me a headache, and I don't get many headaches. Most of the time when you see WWE programming, there's a nice contrast between the sort of dimly lit audience, which you can still see, but they're still quite dimly lit, and the spotlight on the ring. But because of the Thunderdome, there's not enough contrast, and to me, the action doesn't pop enough visually as a result of that, and it's just a bit too much of an eyesore. Even just thinking about it, I can feel my head getting sore. And so I actually don't enjoy the presentation as much as it's very impressive and very spectacular. Their release is up this month, so I'm hopeful that they might be able to do something different, or maybe keep the Thunderdome but just tweak it. If I was them, I would just turn the brightness down on those screens a little bit, just dim that a little bit so there's a bigger contrast with the action in the ring. And I'm surprised I'm not reading more people saying this online. Do you see where I'm coming from with it?
Totally get where you're coming from. I feel like I'm kind of used to it. And I guess I'm quite good at adapting to the new sort of settings, because I don't know if it's because I watch so many different types of wrestling, you know what I mean, that have different presentations and stuff. I kind of talked about Impact recently, how, you know, at first when there's no crowd, you're like, oh, this is a bit hard, but after a while, it's just the way Impact is now. I'm not the biggest fan of the Thunderdome at all. It's definitely usually on a Tuesday morning, you know, it's as I was going to talk about later on. A Tuesday morning is the time that I watch Raw. I watch the highlights of Raw, or I'll catch whatever I can see or whatever. And it's always something that I look forward to, like my wee routines and stuff like that. And a Thursday morning, I always look forward to watching Dynamite and stuff. But there's something about that's just kind of made me I'm a bit more reserved about going to Raw on a Tuesday morning now, and definitely with SmackDown on a Saturday morning, because Saturday's such a busy day anyway.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, it's definitely not because the product is any, you know, worse than usual or any better than usual or whatever. I mean, I still love all the performers, and there definitely is, you know, still really good stuff going on. I think of like Roman Reigns and the Randy Orton stuff and the Sasha and Bayley stuff and all that. But there is something that's holding me back from fully getting into it, and I think it might be the Thunderdome. But that being said, as you say, their lease is up this month. They're going to have Hell in a Cell, and that's going to be it. I don't think I'm going to look back at the Thunderdome and go, oh, what a great time. But I think I'm going to appreciate it in future and be like, oh, that was something different. It was something original.
Yep.
It's really going to stand out. Like, I'm never going to forget that SummerSlam, and I'm never going to forget that ladder match at Clash of Champions. I'm never going to forget Roman Reigns coming out shirtless and having this match with Jey Uso. You know, spoiler, he's shirtless. I'm never going to forget that, you know.
Yeah, and I appreciate the ingenuity of it. I think WWE should be praised for putting, well, God knows they have the money, but putting the money into that and getting something better than the Performance Center. I think in principle it's something that can be respected for a long time. All I want to know is how long it's going to take for the action figure Thunderdome playset.
Very cool. Great idea. I don't know how much it's going to cost. But
yeah,
it's going to be a cool one. I would love that when I was younger. Oh, that would have been... I actually saw a picture of the old SmackDown sort of set thing that they came out with, Jax, the figure set. It was like the SmackDown Fist and the Titantron and stuff. I remember buying it from Argos when I was like 7. It was my pocket money. It was great.
I had the Oval Tron set, Titantron,
nice.
when I was younger. But like the I don't know about the original kind of Titantron set, like the Raw one, but the Oval Tron, which would come out a year or two later, which I had, it had like these little cards that you could insert into this bit in the center of the Tron that would light up, so it was like it was playing the Titantron movie. And you know that bit in Chris Jericho's theme, WWE theme, where it goes, break the walls down, that beginning at the beginning, it would just loop that bit, so it would go, break the walls down, break the walls down, break the walls down. Like, it was the worst part to loop because you wanted a different bit of it, I guess, so they needed a longer loop. It was so jarring.
When you went to do that demonstration of the Jericho song, your audio kind of glitched a wee bit, and it just came back in when you were mid down. So it was just like, break the wall. There you go. Yeah, I loved that one. Those sets were always very exciting, and I couldn't believe they're actually a thing you could play with. You know, I don't see much of that now. It's always these like big fancy ring sets now. You never see the Titantrons and the barricades and the commentator sets and stuff anymore. You know.
I know. I used to love being able to do like the full thing, have an announcer's table, and I used to love because you could assemble those Trons and the rings and stuff. You could do like a ring implosion really easily, or you could have somebody wreck the set. You know, if you wanted to have like a kind of Nexus style, kind of destructive storyline in your figure fed. But we're kind of getting dangerously close to doing our wrestling figure episode, which we are not on this week, Chris.
No, we're not. But I'm glad you mentioned Nexus because I want to talk about them. So usually when we do this we do the show, we talk about what we've been watching this week, but it has to be condensed a little bit because now we need to talk about what we've been watching this month. And predominantly over this month, I've been watching 2010 pay-per-views because I'm still on my watch through, and it's definitely slowed down. I remember back a couple of months ago in lockdown when it was full on lockdown.
Yeah,
I was going a bit nuts, and I was watching maybe 3 pay-per-views over a 2-day period, and like I was just there was nothing else to do. I was just rapidly going through them, and it was like 2008 sort of time.
Yeah.
and they were really easy to watch. And I actively looked forward to them. I was like, oh yes, today is One Night Stand 08. You know what I mean? Like I was getting really excited for it. Now we're in 2010, and I guess civilization is somewhat becoming normal again. And there's plans that can be made, and there's places that can be gone. Now I'm not like, oh, I can't wait to watch Bragging Rights 2010. You know.
Yeah.
But it's still, it's still what I go to. I like watching wrestling right after I've had dinner. It's a weird thing it's a weird routine that I have. Once I've had my dinner, I just have a cup of tea, or after dinner, and I'll probably put on some wrestling. So if there's no like up to date wrestling, then I've been watching kind of like the 2010 stuff and the previous pay per views that I've talked about on the show over the past 25 episodes, or 24 since last week was a comp. I kind of talked about some stuff last week too. It was kind of weird being on my own, but yeah, check out that one if you can. It's the Best of Meet a Wrestler Volume 1. Very exciting.
I like that. It's like Before They Were Superstars, Volume 1. Oh man,
That is exactly.
I just want to also quickly, before we get into the thrust of the episode, I don't know if you were going to bring this up, but I just want to salute and take my hat off to everybody at Inside the Ropes magazine, because I've read the full thing cover to cover now, and obviously we've been out for offline for a few weeks, so we've not been able to talk about it. And I just want to say I think it's excellent, and we can have a more detailed conversation down the line if you want about it, maybe when issue 2 comes out. But yeah, like it'll be out, but that'll be out by the time this goes out. So just well done to Kenny and everyone else at Inside the Ropes, because we are huge fans, and it's just great to see high quality wrestling journalism again.
I love the cover of number 2. It's all blue and white, and it's got Roman Reigns on the cover. Oh, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it really does.
And also, they've got the new Dave Meltzer book that's coming out. You seen this?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
So I was born in 97, so I was thinking that's such a cool idea. Like, it's like the Dave Meltzer Pro Wrestling Yearbook to 1997.
Yeah.
So I'm hopefully going to maybe get that for Christmas or something. I think that'd be a nice wee sort of Christmas idea for Santa. But anyway, what I was saying about about 2010 and WWE pay-per-views is that throughout this watch along, and this watch through, I should say, we got to SummerSlam 2010. And when we did our SummerSlam main event episodes that we did a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago now around SummerSlam time, we got to 2010, and I said that this was the only one that I didn't watch because we watched all the main events and stuff, and I said I've not watched SummerSlam 2010 since it was on, because it was the first time I ever admitted that I was disappointed with a pay-per-view. I remember we bought the pay-per-view, my dad asked me how it was, and I said I didn't really enjoy it, and it was kind of like the first time I admitted that, and I was like, I can't believe I just said that, I don't know why. I just maybe at the time I was going through that smarky phase, and the Big Show beat CM Punk and the Nexus lost and all that stuff, But this was the first time that I'd watched it, and I don't know what I was talking about. It's a great show. It's so much fun. Orton and Sheamus have a very, very underrated WWE title match. One of Sheamus's more underrated matches, I think. Yeah. But then we get to the main event, and when I say SummerSlam 2010, and I say the main event, it's like Team WWE versus the Nexus. The first thing people say is, it's the return of Daniel Bryan. It's really cool. But then the second thing people say is that, they ruined the Nexus. They buried the Nexus, and it was a disgrace after that. And they really... Now, I agreed to a certain degree, right? The Nexus probably should have won. But the argument that Vince had, apparently, according to Wade Barrett, is that Vince said, we can't have the heels beat WWE in the main event of SummerSlam. SummerSlam is our second biggest show of the year. It needs to have a happy ending. We need to, have the crowd go home happy. We can't have the big evil villain beat the big heroes, And I get that, maybe SummerSlam is probably not the best idea for that sort of match. Maybe if it happened at Night of Champions, or maybe if it happened at Survivor Series even, then maybe Nexus should have won. But I get the idea that they kind of wanted Team WWE to be victorious in that one. But then everybody says this is an absolute burial. And I have to disagree with that, because this isn't a burial at all. The Nexus eliminate every single person on Team WWE other than John Cena. And John Cena ends up beating, I think it's Justin Gabriel and Wade Barrett in the final 2. But the Nexus look brilliant, and the commentators are putting them over like they're these killers and these so dangerous, this very dangerous group that are really going to, hurt all the members of the team, and we're in danger just sitting here and stuff. And I just don't think it's a burial at all. I think Cena wins, and I think WWE wins, and the Nexus didn't really take off the way they should have done because they didn't win here. But I don't think it's a burial. I don't think it is as bad as people say. It sets up new wee rivalries going forward. And then, in the months after, John Cena ends up losing a bunch to Wade Barrett. John Cena becomes a member of the Nexus. Wade Barrett is in all the title matches. They're in the main event all the time. SummerSlam comes, and not SummerSlam, is it Night of Champions? I think it was Night of Champions comes, or it might have been Bragging Rights or Hell in a Cell. They all run together. But there's a thing where it's like if Cena loses this match, he has to join the Nexus, and they have Husky Harris and Michael McGillicuddy join the Nexus, and it's this big thing. And I just think like Nexus obviously didn't take off the way that we were hoping, but it's definitely not a dud, and people don't remember it as this big, great group faction storyline, and it is. It was really good, really inventive for the time, and I think it's harsh the way people talk about it. But that was just my wee sort of rant on the SummerSlam 2010 perception. I don't know if you have any memories of that time.
No, I mean, it's been a long time since I watched the match, so
Yeah.
I mean, I do think like they should have won. I don't buy that Vince logic of send the fans home happy, because if that's his policy, then he's so inconsistent with it. Like, like think of SummerSlam 2013, for example. But the one complaint I'll bring up about the Nexus is that when John Cena joined the Nexus, I wanted him to have to go still be a babyface, obviously, but I wanted part of the condition was that he would have to wear a Nexus t-shirt and come out with the Nexus music, not just wear a wee armband, which of course he never did, and the aesthetic bothered me about that. I guess they still wanted to flog his merchandise, but I know. I think the Nexus. It's funny because people say that they were a waste and they were buried totally, but yet there's all this nostalgia for them, and there was all this talk of a Nexus reunion at WrestleMania this past year, or a proposal to do such a thing. So you can't have it both ways. Like, so I think they were successful. There's a reason they're so fondly remembered. It's just maybe they kind of fizzled out in a way that was unbecoming of them. But before we go any further, Chris, and I'm aware that this is only happening 30 minutes after our last unrecorded toilet break, but I think we're going to have to cue that toilet break jingle, I'm afraid. I'll be very quick.
I'll tell you what, you take your time because you need to go down 2 floors.
Toilet break.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, we hope everybody had a nice toilet break, and we hope Glenn has made it upstairs safely again. It is time for our first segment of the week, and I throw over to you to recommend us a match, my friend. Have you got one in mind?
I do. Cue the jingle, my friend.
Wrestling recommendations, wrestling recommendations, wrestling recommendations. Match of the week.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, so it's funny because the two competitors in this match, I actually earlier on in this podcast, I mentioned probably one of their more famous matches when you were asking about best pay-per-view openers, because I'm going to talk about a match which I think I've mentioned before in the podcast. I don't think I've ever recommended it before. If I have, I'm sorry, but I am recommending what should have been the main event of SummerSlam 1994, and it wasn't, and that is the steel cage match. In my view, the best steel cage match in the history of wrestling. Brett versus Owen for the WWF Championship, and it's, in my view, it's better than the WrestleMania 10 opener, which is itself a humdinger. It's like, here's the thing. Traditionally, the cage match is like the violent blow off to an angle, and it is still like their blow off to the match, and it is still quite brutal. But cage matches, traditionally I think of like the likes of like Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes covered in blood, and like, those kind of sloggish kind of cage matches, and those are great.
Right.
But this is still a technical masterpiece. But I have never seen a cage match made so exciting before than with this. They had the best chemistry, so that shouldn't be a surprise. But like the way, like, most people can't make the cage door exciting. They did, when it's not being used to hit somebody in the face, like just running to the cage door and diving for it, and the way that they could. There's a reason why people love Brett and Owen, respectively, as superstars, and I think this was their finest match. I think it's one of Brett's best matches ever. It might be one of Owen's best matches ever. It's just fantastic. It's a simple story to follow. Brothers are rivalry. I think some of the Hart family are there in the audience as well. Owen could have conceivably won this match, but he didn't. Spoiler.
Yeah.
But it was still a great match. And the thing is, even though Owen didn't win, he still comes across as a serious threat to Brett's championships. And I think that's, Brett was a star by this point, but Owen really was made to seem a bigger star in this match. I love it. And if you haven't seen it, folks, it's a real roller coaster. It's so exciting to watch, even when you know what the result is. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. Obviously, 94 is a bit before my time.
Yeah.
I do love the WrestleMania match, and I think I've only watched this match a few times. I did like some mad compilation match highlight thing back in like 2013. I had another YouTube channel called Let's Watch Wrestling TV, which is I don't know why I called it that, but I tried to recreate the Wrestling Channel TV channel, and I was going to call it the Wrestling Channel, but someone had taken that genius nickname or username.
Yeah.
So I tried to make my one of my own, and I was just going to post like highlights and that sort of thing, kind of similar to what I'm doing now on the Wrestling Connection YouTube channel, but without the actual footage. It's more just doing like results and that sort of thing. I've got a plan for that channel. I'm just waiting for I'm waiting for it to click in my head. I know what I want to do for the Wrestling Connection YouTube channel, but I'm still figuring it out, so stay tuned. But back in 2013, I would do these highlight things, and I did like a top 15 SummerSlam matches or something, and I didn't include that one because I'd never probably seen it, right? So then I posted my top 15 SummerSlam matches or whatever, and I got loads of comments being like, where's Bret and Owen, where's Bret and Owen, where's Bret and Owen? So I went back and watched it, and then I removed the whole video and redone it with Bret and Owen in it, because for some reason I felt like I had to cater towards these strangers that were giving me a hard time for not including their favourite match, even though it wasn't one of my favourite matches, just because I hadn't properly watched it, you know. But that was the sort of time I was going through, back then. And I had to watch it because of that. And I did like the highlights of that match and stuff, and I couldn't believe how long it was. You know, usually like steel cage matches are only like maybe 15 minutes. You know, you get over with the brutality of running each other into the cage and that sort of thing, and then maybe there's an escape. But this was a more psychology-based cage match, you know, and it's definitely the best one, I think, with the metal bars, you know, the new generation bars, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, I'm sure they could have made it work in the kind of the mesh cage, but I don't know, there's just something about it. And this is a weird thing that might sound odd, but maybe you'll kind of get what I'm saying because you've watched a bit of like 98 stuff recently, I know.
Yeah.
But 98 was when I think this changed, like the how they built the canvas of the ring changed, but the rings sounded different.
Oh my
people were
God.
slammed on it, you know, and it was harder then. And Foley talks about this in his book and on his DVDs that, you know, it's got a bit more. I am not for a minute saying that it's easy to land on that ring nowadays. Like I would never volunteer. I would never opt into doing it. Like I think back then it was even harder. There was less bounce and less of a give to the ring, and it was much more brutal, and it sounded different. And when I think of Bret and Owen in the new generation, I think I hear that ring sound. It's just different.
JR talks about that in his book. He says that when he became in charge of talent relations, one of the first things he did was make sure we got a softer ring. Because, I mean, Bret Hart does that suplex off the top of the cage, doesn't he, to Owen? And the two of them it's like concrete. It doesn't just sound different. You can feel it, you know. And then Bret would do that thing where he would take the turnbuckle to his chest, you know, and the turnbuckles were harder and tighter. And oh God, that ring looked brutal. No wonder Hogan never fell down ever. You know, he knew what he was getting into.
I mean,
with that
he was a clever guy, Hulk Hogan. Say what you want. Say what you want about Hogan. He was a clever man.
Good businessman. That's what he was. He was a good businessman. But yeah, good shout for match of the week. I think everybody loves this match and knows how great the match is. And if you don't, you've got a perfect opportunity to check it out. I believe it is on the WWE YouTube channel, but of course it'll be on the WWE Network. SummerSlam at 94. 94 is a weird year. I don't know much about it really.
No.
I couldn't give you like a top 10 94 matches, you know. It's a kind of a transitional time, I think, in WWE, but it's like so pure new generation. You know, you think back to new generation and you just think of that particular time, like an episode of Raw or an In Your House or something. In Your House actually didn't happen until 95. Do you know what I mean? You know, that the WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 10 is a bit kind of like stop-starty, I think. But it's just a bit of an odd year. So I don't know if you have any other memories of 94 WWE, but when were you born? 93?
91.
91.
So, I mean, I wasn't really. Yeah, I'm old. I wasn't. You know, aware of wrestling at that point. But like going back to it, you know, I still only really know like that kind of the Bret and Owen stuff from '94. I know WrestleMania 10. But yeah, it's a big transitional year because if you think about the difference in WWE between 93 and 94, sure, you still had like Bret and Yokozuna and stuff, but that was when Hogan left. So that's when WWF really had to find out who it was and try to come into its own post Hogan, post steroid scandal as well. So I think there was a lot,
absolutely,
you know, changing in the business at that time. So it's so interesting to watch Bret and Owen wrestle because it makes me kind of think about how WWE started to kind of phase out Cena when he became
Absolutely.
more part time, and they put more stock into Roman. And now it's funny because now you only think like now we're starting to see the absolute best of Roman, and he's given us a lot of great stuff. But transition's interesting in wrestling, and looking back at a period of time is always fun because you can start to see how things slowly develop into a new era and a new phase. And I think post COVID we will be firmly ushered into a brand new era of WWE. Kind of feels like we're there because Roman's a heel now, and it's very different to what it was 2 years ago. I think this is another transition period.
Roman Reigns is breathtaking, and he's the absolute greatest. Wait, and this match with Jey Uso at Clash of Champions, wait till you see it.
I can't
Right.
wait. I've only heard good things, but yes, yeah.
Um,
Let's move on.
Let's move on to what I'm thankful for this week. I nearly forgot the name of the segment. To what I'm thankful for this week in the WWE.
What I'm thankful for in wrestling this week.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what I'm thankful for this week in pro wrestling is a bit more of a daft suggestion from Bragging Rights 2010. And when you think of Bragging Rights, you think, okay, you're going to have this big 7-on-7 tag match. And of course, in 2009, you had the big Iron Man match. The main event of the one in 2010 is Orton versus Barrett, with John Cena on the outside of the ring. And if Wade Barrett loses the match, then John Cena will be fired. So the Nexus running and stuff, and Cena attacked the Nexus because he says to Wade Barrett, he shouts at Wade Barrett in his face, he's like, if you get disqualified, you lose. And it was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So like Cena was kind of saving him, and you were wondering what Cena was going to do. But then he attitude adjusts Wade Barrett, getting Orton disqualified. So Wade Barrett won the match. So Cena didn't need to be fired, but Orton kept the title. So it was very clever, and I actually thought it was actually a really underrated main event. But also on that show was the masterpiece that was Goldust versus Ted DiBiase Jr. I'm sure you remember this one. Can you tell me the finish of this match?
No, I've never seen it.
Of course you don't. It's the most random match ever. I had no idea this match even existed. I had no idea that Goldust was still on the roster feuding Ted DiBiase in 2010. What on earth, right? The storyline of this match is that Goldust is about to marry one of the contestants on NXT Season 3.
Right.
And her name is Aksana.
Oh,
Remember Aksana?
She was Lithuanian.
Lithuanian, that's right. So she's apparently engaged to Goldust because, get this, because she's from Lithuania, she's being deported. So if Goldust marries her, then Goldust will allow her to stay in the States.
I have no recollection of this whatsoever. This is blowing my mind.
Right. So then they're having this match at the pay-per-view because Ted DiBiase at the time was dating Maurice. And Maurice is getting jealous because Aksana's this beautiful blonde and she's getting all the attention. So then they set up this, match at the pay-per-view between Goldust and Ted DiBiase. And I'm watching this match and the crowd are all just as confused as you are listening to this right now. They're going, what on earth are we doing? And that made me think about what I'm thankful for this week. The most strange yet beautiful wrestling romances out there.
Yes.
So I was thinking Goldust and Aksana, of course, are a very, very unique, strange romance.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why they were together.
Wow.
But also, I thought of other sort of strange ones, like Dolph Ziggler and Vicky Guerrero. Like, it was fine when she was his manager, but it got to the point where she was, his girlfriend. And I thought that was daft. Of course, there's AJ Lee with Daniel Bryan, John Cena, and, wait for it, Kane.
Yes. I still remember her skipping down to the ring with a mask on.
Ironically, also in that storyline with CM Punk, and I don't know what happened with they two as a couple, but there you go. You also have interesting ones like Eugene and Christy Hemme.
Yep.
When Christy Hemme came out as a cheerleader for Eugene. There was Kane and DX Tori. Remember this one?
Oh, yeah.
From like 2000. And she was like Kane's girlfriend, and Kane learned how to speak because of her. And then, of course, the greatest wrestling romance ever, Tajiri and Tori Wilson.
See, that one kind of grew. That had like different dimensions to it because it started off as a very kind of cutesy relationship, and then it became this kind of he's dominating and abusive and neglectful. Right. So at least as funny as that whole dynamic was, they actually let that grow and to do different things.
It's just a funny pairing, you know what I mean?
I was always fond of Spike and Molly.
A great one, yeah, that's good. But the idea with that one was like that was like there was nothing weird about it. I don't think. They were both kind of outcasts and a bit weird out of their groups, you know, and they
Yeah.
kind of went towards each other. Whereas Tori and Tajiri, you know, what the hell?
Yeah. Here, don't you just think that Mandy and Otis would have had a much more like it was a good payoff, but it would have meant more historically had the audience been there, you know, for the payoff of the
Absolutely.
kiss.
They
Can
would
you
have
imagine
popped
if that
like
had been
mad.
Yeah, just imagine a stadium like at WrestleMania 36 and like the moment that happens, they would sell it, they would build up to it. Like it's such a shame. There's a few things that have really suffered as a result of COVID and in wrestling storylines, that is, and obviously the world has bigger problems than what happens at WrestleMania, but
Yeah.
you know, that's one of those things that really needed the audience, I think.
Like, I like Otis, right? I think he's very entertaining and very funny, but he's never a world champion and he's never a Money in the Bank winner. You know what I mean? So I don't
He's not
know.
gonna-
You know, I think that this Mandy Rose thing actually really helped him. I thought, you know, giving him different layers to his character. I just kind of wish he turned on her. You know what I mean? It just kind of ended. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, okay, she's going to turn on him, and like it's going to be this big thing where she's like the evil witch that's turned on him and stuff. But I thought it would have been funnier if he turned on her. He
Yeah.
broke her heart, and he became this big dastardly heel and changed his character. You know, I think he's really funny. Like, and I watch him and I go, right, okay. But there's only so many times he can wrestle John Morrison every week since March. You know what I mean? And still be the same and do the worm thing. He's never going to win the title. There's no way. You think he's going to cash in on Roman Reigns? No way. So that's
Definitely
why.
not.
And that, you know, that's fine. You know, you win the Money in the Bank, you don't need to win the title. But I just want some sort of like possibility. You know what I mean? Like it's not even a thought like the Jey Uso thing. There's no way Jey Uso would have won the title. But it's nice to know that it was a cool story and there was a wee threat to it. You know?
Yeah. No, but here's how I want the Otis cash in to play out if it happens at all. I want like Roman to be like in a vulnerable situation, or maybe he's just been through a big match with somebody, right? I want Roman Otis to run out of the briefcase with no music and like cash in, and Roman doesn't even notice, and then Otis gets close to Roman, and Roman just instinctively turns around and does a spear or a Superman punch and pins him 1, 2, 3, and then walks away as if it hadn't even happened. So he was almost beating him in his subconscious, if that makes sense. I want
Yeah,
I want
like
that to
That's a
happen,
good
so
one.
that you know it's just going to serve to make Roman look even more lethal and more of a badass.
Roman doesn't notice Otis. Well, another. There you go. So that's what I'm thankful for. If you ever see any interesting romances in wrestling, don't roll your eyes and don't go ugh, because it's not all about the in-ring technical wrestling. Sometimes you need a bit of a story. Sometimes you need a bit of personality. And I like the romances sometimes. I think they're really funny. Let's quickly do random wrestler recollection, and then we'll sign off for this week, will we?
Sounds good.
Okay. Who's it going to be this week? Reaching into the random box of random wrestlers and pulling out a random wrestler. Glenn, give me your thoughts of Mr. Kennedy.
Man, I remember like being 16. So in 2007, I was 16, and obviously Kennedy had been around for a couple of years at that point. But like, I think that was the point. It was like when he just came back and just before he got fired, actually, in that tag match for hurting Orton or dropping
That's
Orton in
right.
that bad way. Like I remember thinking that, oh, because he came back and he was a face, and just thinking that this is going to be his moment. He had so many ups and downs with like winning the briefcase, and I often wonder where he would be now had he been able to do what he set out to do. Because I think a lot of people forget this is that Mr. Kennedy won the Money in the Bank,
Yep.
and the next night said that he was going to cash in at WrestleMania 24. And I just wonder how would things be different had he gone ahead with that? What would the plan have been? Who would he have faced for the title? Presumably he would have won the title, you hope. But you know, it stands to reason that we might not have had Edge versus Taker in 24
Yeah.
if that had been the way. And would they have given Kennedy the streak? It's possible if they had enough faith in him. Or maybe he would have wrestled Hunter or something like that. Who's to know? But here, like, you know, he gets injured, he comes back and very quickly gets fired after that, which was a real shame. And everyone said he was like a young Steve Austin, and I loved him. I loved his something about him. He had that X factor and that charisma. And some people would have maybe thought that when he got fired, that maybe it would be a matter of time before he's back, or he can go to Impact and do good things. And I don't know a huge amount about his Impact stuff, but I just don't think he ever got back to being that kind of star again. There's been plenty of people that have gone to TNA in that era, and it's done them good stuff. The first name that comes to mind is Christian. He goes to TNA, he
Absolutely.
does great stuff there, and then he goes back and he's this bona fide WWE legend, and he would go on to be world champion in WWE again. So, and I think I saw Kennedy wrestle twice. I saw him like at a WWE house show in 2007, and I can't remember, he wrestled Bob Holly, and he bet Bob Holly. And then I saw him at ICW once in the garage as
Nice.
Mr. Anderson. So right up nice and close to him, and that was pretty cool too. But really, see, when I think of him, I just think, damn, what could have been? That's what I keep coming back to with Mr. Kennedy. He had so much potential. He was one of my favorites when I was a teenager. And I just kind of think, man, I would have been so interesting to see what could have happened had he not been injured, had he been able to, take advantage of that kind of hype that he had. What comes to mind when you think of Kennedy?
Immediately, I think of how much of a sort of a prospect he was. There was so much high hopes for him, and I like, even as a young guy, I knew that everybody, like the management, loved him, and there's a good chance he's going to be a main eventer, and you know what I mean. Like, it always felt as if he was just below the main event, and he was just about to get there. And then when they won the Money in the Bank, I know everybody in the wrestling world was kind of thinking, "This is it." He has the X factor, not X-Pac, Albert, and Just Incredible, but I mean, he has that it factor. He has that sort of like that we spark to make him a superstar, And I think Vince loves him. And remember the rumor that he was supposed to be Vince's son?
Yeah.
He was really supportive. We came down to him, Triple H, Hornswoggle, and the Sandman. So there you go, because he was obviously Kennedy. Sandman would have been perfect. Just Vince starts hitting folk with canes and that. But yeah, listen, I was never the biggest Mr. Kennedy fan. I never, even when he was a face, I never took to him that well. My mate Grant, who was like my best friend growing up, he loved Kennedy, and even loved Mr. Anderson as well. He had like all the Mr. Anderson merch and all that stuff. And I really liked the Mr. Kennedy wrestling figures. I don't know if you remember any figures that he had, but he had really good and really detailed figures. Like maybe he had that tattoo and like on his back, the red kind of Randy Orton like tattoo.
Yeah.
They were always on the figures and stuff, and I think that the first figure he had in the blue kind of trunks was quite hard to get at the time. And then he had like a deluxe figure that came out, which was like the silver trunks. And my mate Grant had that figure and just used it all the time. He played with it all the time. So it was a very nice way to look back at Mr. Kennedy, and it's nice to know that he had all these high hopes. And it's obviously, he had to do something right, to get the Money in the Bank and to get this feud with Undertaker and all that stuff. But it's just a shame that he got suspended a bunch of times for drugs, and he got hurt a bunch of times, and just that he was a bit of his own demise, But he had a lot of potential, and now I do think his time has passed. I don't think he was like a sort of John Morrison situation where he's gone out and rebuilt his career and then he's come back. And although John Morrison is still kind of doing the same thing as he was doing before he left, he was still able to come back and he's still relevant. I think if Mr. Kennedy was to come back, I don't think he would be looked at in the right way, in my opinion. But I do think he was a bit of a liability for the company. But I do think he had so much potential when, what could have been. He could have been, in those main events against Randy Orton and John Cena and Triple H and Undertaker and stuff. And it would be a whole different career. We could be sitting here talking about him as this bona fide WrestleMania main eventer. But now we just talk of him as a guy that got fired and what could have been,
Yeah, and like, and I know this is not like, we shouldn't really turn the focus to another wrestler, but I feel, and this might be a bit more controversial, I feel the same way because it's the same era of superstar. I feel the same way about MVP. Now, let me be clear, I love what he's doing now since he came back.
Yeah.
But MVP was also of that generation, and I always felt he was so close to breaking through to the main event, and he did a lot of stuff like with top guys in his prime. Yeah. But I think he could have feasibly, I'm not saying he would have been the next Undertaker or Rock, but I think he could have been like a good, solid main event star. Like, and it just never happened for him. And I often wonder why that was. Why couldn't that have happened? I know he left, obviously, and that's usually why. But even before he left the WWE in 2010 or 2011, whenever it was, he wasn't as on fire as he had been. And so I kind of think of MVP and Kennedy in the same way, but more so Kennedy because at least MVP has had this resurgence,
I agree. I know exactly everything you said about MVP, and I agree with it. I like MVP a lot, especially the Hurt Business stuff. I think it's a really cool presentation, and I hope they go with it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they've got this, they've got Cedric Alexander being relevant, they got Shelton Benjamin finally relevant. My God, how did they mess that up? And then, of course, Bobby Lashley's Bobby Lashley. But I think MVP's doing a really good job. I love the presentation of them all in suits, and the fact that Lashley's the US champion. I like the theme song. It sounds a bit like the Jaws theme.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like it a lot, and I hope they go with it. I hope it doesn't just be this sort of 1 week thing, you know. But yeah, happy to see MVP back. Don't get me wrong, I would be happy to see Mr. Kennedy back, but I just don't think there's much there for him to do. You know what I mean? So let's hope that I know he's doing stuff for the NWA just now, but I've not been watching. It's not really my thing. I tried watching that Power show, the kind of retro in studio wrestling thing, but it's not really my thing. So, but fair play to them. If you can make money, go do it, my friend. Go do it. You need to make money for your drugs somewhere, Kennedy. Right.
Hey.
So let's wrap this up. Another episode done and dusted. Episode number 26. It feels so good to be back. And yes, next week we're going to have something fun in store. So make sure you tune in for episode number 27. But until then, Glenn, anything you'd like to say upon your return?
No, I'm just so happy to be back here in the Glen Cave. And thank you to anyone who takes the time to listen. Much appreciated.
That's the Glen Den, remember. So until next time, folks, thanks very much for listening to The Wrestling Connection. We will speak to you all next week. Be safe, be happy, and have fun with your lives.